Great, thank you, Logan. Can everybody hear me okay? Great, okay, well thank you to the Saulteau people for welcoming us on their territory today and for allowing us to do our work, this really important work that we have to do together. And I've appreciated the conversation so far this morning, and I think what we'll be able to offer to you is a bit of a deeper dive into what it looks like, what these partnerships look like, and what stewardship looks like in region from the perspective of pretty much the founders of regional partnerships and stewardship, and some of the work underway in region. So what we're going to do is bring you the story of Collaborative Stewardship Framework, or CSF, and it's a story of a partnership that began about 12 years ago and has been kind of quietly building momentum ever since. And we know that success leaves clues, right? And we're starting to see some clues. We're starting to learn some lessons that we think might be applicable and relevant to the conversation today. So we're really honored to bring this discussion to you. So I have with me three panelists who have been instrumental in building this approach. So we've got David DeWitt here, a member of the Wet'suwet'en Nation, and was Executive Director and Natural Resource Manager for the Wet'suwet'en Hereditary Chiefs for the Office of the Wet'suwet'en for almost 20 years, and brings a wealth of experience, as you can imagine, to the conversation today. We have Dr. Dave Schaepe at the far left there, Director of the Stolo Research and Resource Management Center with Stolo Nation, and he is the co-lead of the Temexw Stewardship Alliance, one of the collaborative stewardship forums. And in the middle here we have Ryan McKay, a land and resource planner with Saulteau First Nation. And Ryan's been integral in partnership models in Treaty 8 territory up in the Northeast. So I'm really excited to bring this conversation to you today. I do encourage you to look through the IROC program that you have in front of you and read the bios, and you'll get a sense of the breadth and wealth of experience on our panel. So with that, I'd like to turn to each of the panelists and have them introduce themselves, and then we're going to go through a round of questions around the CSF and do a bit of a deeper dive on these partnerships. So David, maybe we'll start with you. If you could please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Hari Tsonzen, hello, are you well? Sa Dekenwalat Sydney, Zit, Irene Brown, Sydney Ann Bakai, Virginia DeWitt, Sebep, Lexiliu Dista, Wadaket Denise Cho. My name's David DeWitt. Like Lisa said, I worked with the Hereditary Chiefs for 20 years and had the great honor of working and being a founding member of the Environmental Stewardship Initiative, the Skeena Sustainability Assessment Forum, and the Collaborative Stewardship Forum. And I'll speak more about it, but our goal and our vision is using traditional knowledge, braiding that with Western science, and create an atmosphere where community values and needs are understood by government, by industry, where voices from the community are felt to inform and create informed decisions, to create data, and to lead to having ingredients to shape a future we all want to see ourselves in. So I'm blessed to work with these teams, blessed to have great teachers from our community and elders. And I just want to take this opportunity to not only recognize Temexw territory, but their ancestors, the spirit of the land, and the spirit of the water. And I felt that Elder Lawley helped tether our hearts and minds this morning. And I want to thank all of you, because we are all a part of each other's journey, and we're all here with intentions of shaping a healthier future for the unborn. So I would say, aside.
Thank you, David. Ryan, if we could move to you next, and if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks. And I don't know how to follow that intro, but I'll do my best. My name is Ryan McKay. I work for Saulteau First Nations in Treaty 8 territory. I've worked for them for about 8 years now. I am Cree and Ojibwe and Métis and Scottish, so I'm not a member of Saulteau, but I think how I started this journey was really in my background in education, critical theory, and I worked with a number of nations on Vancouver Island, and I kept remembering times with my grandfather who taught me about my people and how he'd speak our language, and he would teach me various ways. And it brought me, as I worked with nations on Vancouver Island, it just brought me this yearning to continue to work after my education with nations. And so I moved up to Saulteau into Treaty territory to start that new chapter. Through the years, I've moved to working mostly in negotiations and land use planning. One of the main mandates given to me by my chief is the implementation of the consensus agreements. Some of those for Saulteau, those agreements that came post Yahé decision. And so whether that be restoration or wildlife or collaborative stewardship, that's something that I've been working on for a number of years. It's easy to work on it because I deeply believe in collaboration. I said to someone earlier, I think I'm collaborative to a fault. So once in a while, my chief has to pull me back a little bit and trying to do too much collaboration. But I truly believe in it, and it's one of the things we're here to talk about today.
Thank you, Ryan. I can attest to that. You are deeply collaborative, and it's one of the reasons that our work has moved forward in such a good way, for sure. So Dr. Dave Schaepe, I'll pass it over to you, last but not least, to introduce yourself.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, and Eilatith, good morning. I'm Dave Schaepe, and actually, I really like this chair. It makes me feel like Captain Kirk, actually. So I was going to say, should we go to warp speed? I think that's what we're doing here, going to warp speed with these relationships as a focus of this conference. It's a pleasure to be here today and to have the opportunity to present to you all and to be a part of this panel with these esteemed colleagues. I'm a settler from the United States originally and have lived here in BC since 1993 and started working for the Stalo communities at Stalo Nation in 1997, so just coming up on 30 years. My background is in anthropology, archaeology. My PhD is from UBC, but ultimately working and taking this field of experience and education and applying that within a community context has been the real learning experience for me, and never would have imagined being in the position I'm in today, which, over the course of those years has given me training in negotiations and exposure to a way of understanding and viewing things through a Stalo worldview, which infiltrated and completely transformed my understanding of what I do. So it's been a huge benefit to me, and to be able to be involved in the development of, in the context of what we're talking about here, critical, we'll call them regulatory pieces of instruments. The Stalo Heritage Policy, being a co-developer and administrator of that over the past quarter century, the Stalo Heritage Investigation Permitting Process and System, the Saulteau Use Plan. These are critical policies that are applied now through the Saulteau Stewardship Alliance. That's the group of 17 Stalo First Nations who I work for as their general manager and chair, also as the director for the Stalo Research and Resource Management Center as a central support base and pillar to support the STSA in their arenas of operations that include the Collaborative Stewardship Forum, as well as the People of the River Referrals Office and the Saulteau Guardians. We have, in the process of the past 10, 12 years since the STSA formed, really gained ground in our experience working with major projects, Trans Mountain Expansion Project, currently the Sunrise Expansion Project, BC Hydro Project before that, and can speak to the processes and positioning of the STSA on a basis of inherent rights to be a regulator in the field that we're dealing with resources, extraction, management, stewardship, and so on. So it's a pleasure to be here today. I'll stop there. We only have 27 minutes left, so Captain Kirk's going to sign out for a moment.
Thanks, Dave. That's great. I appreciate that. And actually, maybe what I'll do is actually address some of these questions as we go here. One of our first questions is just how did your organizations become involved in this framework initially, and how did you hope it would work? And so maybe that'll help me provide a bit of a background around what CSF is, and then we'll launch into some of the details here with some questions. But essentially, the CSF, as I mentioned, it was a little bit ahead of its time 12 years ago. There were at a time, a lot of you will recall, there were 9 pipeline proposed corridors out to the north coast from the northeast. And there were a number of nations whose territories were to be impacted and intersected with those proposed pipeline corridors. And a number of the nations were saying to us that sort of a 30 to 45 day consultation window was not going to work in this case. That a strategic off-ramp of some sort was required to have those strategic planning conversations outside of the formal authorizations process, which felt too late and a bit jammed. And it was actually David in early days that was one of the people putting up his hand and said, I don't know if we should be talking about how this pipeline's going to cross this stream yet. We haven't even talked about where this pipeline's going to go and done that overall strategic planning work together. And interestingly enough, government heard that loud and clear and said, okay, let's do that. Let's create that strategic off-ramp and remove ourselves from those tight windows of consultation and engagement and get back to those strategic level co-management conversations. And the energy minister at the time invested $30 million in 2015 to create the Environmental Stewardship Initiative, which was the genesis of the collaborative stewardship framework. So those 38 nations whose territories were bisected by those proposed pipeline corridors were invited to initially 4 strategic forums across the north area. So Ryan and his nation and David and Wet'suwet'en were obviously part of those original 4 nations. And that model worked quite well. So we went back for a second mandate in 2018. And I'll just note on the side that even the mandate, like when I went to Cabinet to present the mandate request in 2018, our mandate submission was co-written. So it was one of the first times where we actually held the pen on the submission to Cabinet. And I was bringing my colleagues with me to my ADM committees and so on. And so that in itself was a really interesting process. And I think government was a little taken aback on like, oh, wow, this is what collaboration looks like. We're doing everything together. So that was really interesting to test that out. We did subsequently receive a second mandate in 2018. Fast forward to today, we now have 15 collaborative stewardship forums around the province and over 150 nations working in partnership at the regional level, basically following the premise that local people know their local resources and are the stewards of the land and know best. And it's the genesis of that partnership approach. So we're going to address 3 key areas around collaborative stewardship today. So we're going to talk about those structures. What do they actually look like? How do they position themselves? How do they work with those major project offices that you're hearing about, for example? And then we're going to get into some of the experiential observations that nation partners have, both as forum members, but now, and this is kind of a new twist in the last few years, but as equity owners, right? As partners in the major projects themselves, but certainly still the strong stewards of the land. So what does that look like from the nation's perspective? What does that look like on the ground? And then thirdly, we're going to get into some of the challenges and opportunities. So we're going to talk about, there's discussions around DRIPA, for example. How do we think that forums ground us in times of volatility? So we're going to get into all of this. So I'm going to ask the panel some questions. And panelists, you know what's coming. We've had some great discussions, as you can imagine, leading into this. So let's get into it. So David, I might start with you for the first question. So can you just describe your experience with regional partnerships and as sort of a founding member and thought leader behind this process? What does it really look like in community for you? And how is that work reflected and understood by community members?
Great question, Lisa. I will also reflect back and provide some context. The Environmental Stewardship Initiative was born in some tumultuous times. As Lisa mentioned, there was just a bombardment to linear major projects. We were working under the old Environmental Assessment Act. Many companies collecting information in different ways, and there was no coordination. And we really felt, I think, nations and government were just reacting on our heels. So collective, we all knew something needed to change. And thankfully, that through good leadership and through mindsets of moving from collaboration and just talking about working together to actually to actually getting down to the business of making a commitment to work together.
None of them working?
Tess.
I'm going to start yelling.
So we transitioned from just talking about things to taking a step back in a strategic place.
We already switched. None of them work. Yep. We can speak loud.
Yeah.
Yep.
To invest in a relationship where understanding could be developed. And I think we've transitioned from transactional relationships, trying to get to the end of a permitting process, trying to get to an end of a stage to contribute information and data to a milestone of a regulatory process that didn't reflect nor understand the values that were important for the communities, the needs that the communities had. And we're in a different place now. There's a new Environmental Assessment Act, and there's space to build relationships, build understanding, and we found in the early days, as known, I'm not an analyst, but as known as Data Dave, because we were advocating to be generating trusted data. We found that traditional use studies are nice, but they sit on the shelf. We needed data to actually inform decisions. We were very well experienced in responding to processes that resulted in political and economic decisions, but we needed ingredients for our leadership to make informed decisions, not only to protect culturally significant values, but to give them the confidence that they could participate in the economic fabric of our lands without compromising the values of the future generations. And for our hereditary leaders, that is their utmost responsibility, and it is a matter of life and death. If we don't manage our territories well, the resources that sustain life, that sustain economy, will not be there for the future generations. And that's one of the gifts that we're bringing to the table, is our knowledge of the territory. Our governance systems are orchestrated to fulfill roles of orchestrating trade and commerce on our territory. Through traditional stewardship, we managed our territories for abundance. And so through this forum, we're able to have our own people generate information. We have our own people out on the territory, and our own people working with government and industry. And when our grannies see our people in these places, there's a level of confidence and security that the grandmothers and the mothers pass on to our leadership, to the technical workers. And that was a golden dream that we are trying to achieve, is not just informing decisions, but helping shape a collective understanding and a future that we could all see ourselves in. And it was an interesting journey because I think there was many that didn't think that the hereditary system and elected system, the clans and bands, could to do this very important work. But the Environmental Stewardship Initiative provided a unique place for all of us to come together on values that sustain culture, language, life, and those political boundaries started to disintegrate. And we're thinking about the children, we're thinking about the future, and we're able to strategically work together for the betterment of our communities. And we started to look farther down into the future. So that area to focus on solutions and build was very refreshing, coming from a world where we were in procedural steps of consultation that didn't work for nations. And so that's what the Environmental Stewardship Initiative, that's what the Collaborative Stewardship Forum has helped facilitate, is shaping a path and a process forward to inform decisions. And information, again, is the foundation for our leaderships to have confidence to participate in the economy. It has the information to help us realize how to manage our territories for abundance and hopefully give us the tools to change regulations and barriers that promote us from managing the land as we once did, for bounty, for plenty. We knew our landscape was changing a lot sooner than some of our parties. We have more fires. There's different economic conditions that are happening globally and to the south, but together we are not talking about reconciliation. We're focusing on steps to implement reconciliation. And that's what true collaboration is taking action and moving forward in a mutually beneficial way. Tabi Masai.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, we're just going to take a 5-minute break, everybody, while we reboot the AV system. So just keep your seats, talk amongst yourselves, and we'll bring you all back in 5. Thank you.
Project.
Yeah. Oh, that was great.
Sure. Thank you, Lisa.
You're off the hook, Brian.
We get to reset the clock, right? We get another 30.
Yeah, we're not losing time. No, that was perfect. We'll pick up on reconciliation and data, and then we'll go from there.
You have such a natural way, and the lightness that you bring is really
Yeah.
me. I relax in it. The way you started.
You're welcome. It's Teresa or Alia. She was prodding me to be funny.
Is that the person that you came over and saw you?
Yeah, she's Stephen Point's daughter. She's from Schaepe First Nation. I worked with her when I was the treaty director, basically, and she was one of the members of our communications outreach team. So I've known Alia. She's now our local MLA. She's a conservative of all things. Yeah, I know. It was, when she was running, I asked, like, so what are you doing? Like, how is that possible? You know, end of the day, like, she's there to try to initiate change within that party. Yeah, so that's the challenge. And you go, all right, you know, I've gotten support from different perspectives. It doesn't come from any one party.
Pick up on the data and reconciliation.
I might answer it. want to say something. I don't know what to say.
And then Dave, we're going to you for the big one.
For the big one, I'm ready. I'm ready. I got a plan.
But I'd love to get into your PRO.
Yeah, certainly. I'll try to keep it, I'll keep an eye on the clock. So I'll try to keep it, see if we got 15 minutes left, and I'll try to keep it fairly concise. I mean, these guys are making really good points about CSF. There's no need to get in and talk about trusted community, really. So I'll try to follow up with questions before that. Yep. How many minutes on time? I just go so quick. They must have blown a fuse, I guess. He's good. I know, isn't that fun? Something weird always happens. Like, more often than not, to me, like when I have to go give a talk or something, I'll get up in the morning, I'll cut myself shaving, and I'll have like a thing that will not stop bleeding. Why is it always so weird? It's like, you just go, okay. It's a good crowd, though.
I'll be interested to know how you see it.
Yeah. I've been so big with it. It's good. I've give you like an extra 4 or 5 minutes. I'm so sorry. This is it's super weird, like in the middle. It would have been one thing if we had turned it off, but like, yeah, it's a good.
Check, check, check. Check, check. 1, 2.
Yeah, so sorry again. So we've added 2 speakers as a fail-safe, so that won't happen with these. But hopefully the broom comes back. Those are running entirely separate. Yeah.
If you want to reset, if you want to re-say a piece of what you're going to do, use the timers.
300 people. More than 200.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. If I can grab your attention back at the front. We are going to restart this panel. So we've added a few more minutes to their time. Thank you all so much for your patience while we sorted out the AV issues. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa.
Are we supposed to have mics that work now? No. Does yours work? Oh.
Yep.
Okay, welcome back. We are used to adversity. We are used to volatility. That's what it's all about. That's why CSF exists. Look how strong the partnership stayed during that moment of volatility. That's CSF in a nutshell. So I'm hoping that folks heard what David had to say. Every word was so important, so thank you, David, for sharing that. And I certainly cannot repeat what you shared with us, but I'll just kind of use it as a launch point. You were talking about data. I'd forgotten that people called you Data Dave. And I was so excited to meet you, and then I was like, that's the guy I got to work with. So David did explain the importance of data and information, and then you moved into a term we use often in CSF around reconciliation. And folks on my team know this well, that I am all about action and work. And the words matter, the mandates matter, the plans matter, but more than anything, it's about getting out into the field, getting to the communities, and getting the action, getting moving on this stuff, right? There's an expectation from all of us, from industry, from regulators, certainly from our communities and from nations, that we move. That's not just words. So Thanks for providing that foundation, David. And Ryan, if we can move to you next. What I want to ask you, Ryan, is your perspective working with a nation who is a very strong steward of the land in Treaty 8 territory, Saulteau First Nation, and also a strong equity owner on a project, right? And a leader in the clean energy space. So what does that look like from your perspective as land and resource manager? How do you navigate those two worlds, and how do you bring that stewardship perspective together with that economic reconciliation that clearly your nation has stated as, you know, of key importance for your community?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. I think I'm going to follow David here a bit and say I'm going to step back just a bit to try to answer that. When I first started at Saulteau First Nations, I remember reading a little news article, and it was about, and maybe some people know about it, but it was about a nation in British Columbia that was building a hydroelectric dam. And essentially the article was about ways in which development could be done better. It wasn't a this or that situation where we could steward the land in a good way, or we could have economic benefit and development. It was a nation who was partnering with both government and some industry to do it in a different way that addressed cultural concerns, environmental concerns, and they were still able to develop. And I remember, you know, that article, it kind of, just the idea of it stuck with me through the years of working with Saulteau. And, you know, at the department I work in is called the Treaty Rights and Environmental Protection Office. It's essentially a lands office. And most often we are focused on Indigenous rights and that environmental piece. And we don't get to, or we're not necessarily mandated in that space to look at economics and development as closely in terms of the benefits that it might have for a nation. So as my role evolved, I started moving more and more into spaces where I needed to collaborate and address those development maybe opportunities or challenges that came about. And so another step back is during that same time, I was also tasked to sit on a stewardship forum called the Regional Strategic Environmental Assessment, which is also under the same framework that we're talking about today. And it's, you know, sitting at, as we all do, sitting at all these tables where, and you know, it's better today than it was 8 years ago, but sitting at these many tables where there was no shared decision making, there was no co-stewardship on the land. But at this particular stewardship, RC is what we call it, it was the first time that I had seen actual shared decision making. There was no decisions made in terms of information, hiring consultants, doing all sorts of the things that we did, working on different values. There was nothing that was done without, and I'll also say most of the Treaty 8 nations were there. I think there was one that was absent, and we all made these decisions together. A colleague of mine, you know, we all used to say government to government. He I don't know if he coined the phrase, I think he did. He says government with government, and that's sort of the way in which Saulteau started and continued to operate. It's the way that a number of BC, a number of folk in BC operate. And I say a number because it's still a struggle. There are still, it is about relationships. It is about the people. There are still challenging people to work with. And I think that is, you know, if I want to talk about collaboration, that is one of the keys to collaboration. Is often people think collaboration is easy. It is the hardest thing. true collaboration is very hard, because we have to get away from our positions and get back into those interests of each other. And so through that forum, we were able to make shared decision making together. We were able to develop trusted data, as David and others have talked about. And I don't want to say anything too controversial here, but I'll just quickly say this, really quick. The court case, the Blueberry court case, was won on trusted data. There was a whole bunch of disturbance data and other values, and that's why that court case was won, which I would argue has moved reconciliation and shared decision making and collaborative spaces and stewardship forward a lot. And I think even, you know, I've talked to many people in the BC government about it as well, and there are many of those people that and I won't name names, that's for sure, but that will say, now because of that case, now we get to work in the way in which we have wanted to work. There are so many good people in BC that really want to do this good work. And so that's what we see in the Collaborative Stewardship forums is those, mostly those people that really do want to do things in a good way, and it's and form those relationships and do that work. So getting back to the original question, we've had Saulteau's formed, and other nations in Treaty 8 have formed really great partnerships with a number of developers. We have a large wind project going on, a 200 megawatt wind project. It's all on private land. So that makes us, in terms of stewardship, it makes us, you know, it's all on farmland, makes us feel a bit better. But, you know, that company came to us really early in the process and started forming those relationships and talking about our interests. Before they did too much investigation, there was no shovels in the ground. And so, you know, those sort of, and I've heard it, you know, earlier today, the sessions, I've heard people say it over and over again, that early engagement is absolutely key. We have other partners in licensees for forestry that now, rather than spend a whole bunch of money going into the forest and engineering, they come to us now first, and they talk to us about planning. And they say, well, what do you think about this area? We want to put a block here, and we want to do this block a little differently to address your cultural concerns. And so it's through those relationships, and I can call them up anytime, and they can call me, and they've got my cell phone. It's through those relationships that we really have come to a place where, you know, we're still checking on each other, but there is a lot of trust built there. And it's that early engagement, planning together, transparency, that is really feels like we're so far ahead. So our Collaborative Stewardship Forum is a place where nations have come together, government has come together, where we're working on trusted data together, trusted values, and we're really starting. You know, it's not a replacement for the consultation process at all, but it is a great place to build those relationships and start planning and working on important projects.
That's great. Thanks, Ryan. And it's important to acknowledge those tough times as well, right? And to hit on the controversial a little bit. The work we do is not just feel-good work. There's a real imperative and necessity around it. So I appreciate you hitting on that. And from a provincial perspective, having to open up the black box of cumulative effects management was such a great milestone that the province needed to go through and understand, like, where were the deficiencies on cultural indicators? They were all over the place. And now the work that the forums are doing to fill in those gaps from a data perspective. And I'll just quickly answer one of the questions in terms of bringing Indigenous youth out into the field. We do that through all of our monitoring and our Guardians work, right, and collecting the data out in the field. All of that is meant to contribute to that wealth of information that the courts found was lacking and wasn't trusted and wasn't truly addressing impacts on Treaty 8 way of life in case of that particular decision. So thank you, Ryan, for that great answer. And Dr. Dave, if we could move to you next, please. And I'm going to give you a trickier question here, but I know you're up for the task. Talking about DRIPA and recent sort of discussion in the political realm and in public discourse, how do we continue to work together in an enduring way through these volatile times? Like, how do forums show up during volatility, and what is it about your CSF forum that you think may persist through any changes to legislation or partnerships or political mandates, for example? I wonder if you can speak to that topic.
What's DRIPA? Just a little joke there. Originally, the way we sort of crafted this question, the word certainty was in it, and certainly in the conversations yesterday and today, that word certainty keeps coming about. So, it's something that's challenging and risk-inducing, fear-inducing in the context of the DRIPA discussions in some ways, but it's a general way of describing, in large part, the atmosphere today around Indigenous rights and relationships. But certainty, if that's what we're seeking, it's number one, it's an English word. What does it mean? And so looking that up, it means having no doubt about something. So the important part of that is to understand then and focus on what is the something, because otherwise it seems quite variable, right? It could be applied to your table. What's the certainty at your table? Well, it's one of, in that case, relationships. So certainty can be applied to relationships, which has been a huge word being used across this panel and throughout the other panels. And in the context of relationships, by definition, certainty leads to, and it's founded on trust and predictability. Other words that were used as well, trust and predictability. Okay, so you take this in, let's frame it in a CSF context. We are working together. And you think about it as partners co-occupying an ecosystem. Okay, eco in Greek means house. So partners co-occupying a home. Okay, we all have this experience in large part. Anyone with partners, anyone who co-occupies a home literally understands the need to recognize each other's values, to get to know each other so well that you become predictable to each other. Right? And if you take a situation like that, and I'm going to add what I found to be really a great statement from Ovid Mercredi. I heard him say this in 2024, which was, there's two inherent rights, there's two human rights of Indigenous peoples, the right to belong and the right to be different. Right? And I think that's exactly the case for any partnership co-occupying a home, co-occupying an ecosystem. Right? If you have one partner that does not recognize the other, their values, their data, their trusted data, their meanings of things, and one is ignoring the other, you are certain to have conflict. Right? There's a certainty there. If you take a CSF approach and a collaborative approach that's inclusive and accommodates those two human rights of belonging and being different, then it's not so much difference, it's understanding the values, the perspectives, the relationships, the attachments, and the meaning of things to everybody's health, well-being, and so on. What are your interests? Right? It's not seeing it as different, it's putting it into alignment, acceptance, inclusion, and working together to share decisions about what happens to that home of ours, right? Of the partners. What happens to that ecosystem? And for so long, decisions have been made unilaterally, without sharing, without consideration of the impacts on the values and interests and relationships of Indigenous peoples to their home for thousands and thousands of years through the actions of newcomers. CSF, we've taken that up to form this relationship that moves us in a different direction, and increasingly so at warp speed, to identify collectively, collaboratively, the values out there, to assess those values in the sense of looking at the integrity of, in this case, Saulteau for the Stalo Stalo lands, Stalo world, to incorporate Stalo worldviews to bring together Indigenous and Western science. And to share in doing this and to take the responsibilities and to work through critical issues and needs, including resource deficiencies. We do this together. As Lisa said, we put together and co-develop the mandates. We work through our project profiles. And we do this under a Halkomelem language framework that we call Letsamod. Right? Certainty, in my mind, is Letsamod, and that it means one mind, one team. And another word in Halkomelem, Letsathala, one heart. So huge difference in taking that approach, applying that Stalo Halkomelem principle to everything we do. We do it together as one. Very, very different than any experience I've ever had in the past preceding 20 years. The past 10 have really been a factor of change and also incorporating other elements and principles leading to not ownership, but caretaking. It's stewardship on behalf of the future generations, everybody's future generations, wanting similar values of good water, clean environments, and so on, healthy systems, healthy home, and healthy partnerships and individuals, and the inclusion of youth and education between partnerships and for the youth to build the foundations for training and bringing up the younger generations of stewards into this world to take over our seats. And with an outlook of Tombiac, 7 generations back and future looking from here today. So understanding our current condition is kind of the profile of our situation, and what we're talking about today includes all of you to build your partnerships and understand how to do this in the spirit and application of Letsamod. I'll stop there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave. And yeah, I do look around the room and I see other CSF partners in the room, which is really great to see. And, you know, under the STSA, you know, it's not to be overlooked that is 17 nations at one table. Treaty 8 nations coming together. The Skeena Forum has been around 10 nations, some elected systems, some hereditary, who at one time, you know, weren't around the same table. So that in and of itself was a huge milestone. We do have 2 CSF team members in the audience as well, Sean and Julia over in the far corner there. There they are. So they'll have extra material out at lunchtime if you want to connect with them at all. But with the remaining time we have, and this time has just flown by, but I do see another question around Indigenous data collection and data sovereignty. And so Dave, I might turn back to you to close us out in terms of data sovereignty and Indigenous knowledge and how that has persisted through this model.
Thank you, Lisa. In any process, good governance results in good process. It results in great teams. What we've learned is we trained a lot of youth to collect data. We found efficiencies in 10 nations coming together to train, had more than enough seats to include more youth, and we also taught them how to manage data. So there's great resources out there on ownership, control, access, and possession of data. I wonder if our data governance framework is available. There's a lot of work, there's a lot of time, energy, and years of work that went into creating trust, not only trusted data, credible data, data methodology so that we are giving a legacy to the future generations to use information to shape their future. So we actually changed, I don't know, I'll say it, the provincial shared cost arrangements to include data provisions that the nations own the data. And we let the government use it. Creating trusted data with good governance and good data management and generating trusted data also open the doors for the need to industry to contribute data and have good data management for decision makers. Protect the commercial competition aspects of things, but to be decision makers that have the right information to plan for healthy communities now and into the future takes that trusted data. It takes the confidence in the membership to share information in a way that follows their cultural protocols. So I just wanted to touch on that data framework. And maybe I'll just take this time to just highlight that data management framework is your stepping stone to use collaborative stewardship forums for your own planning. For the SKENA Sustainability Assessment Forum, we rendered down 60 values to 5 values to create consistent methodologies for these values and to develop state-of-the-value reports. What's the abundance and distribution of this? For your nation's own community plans, you could use these methods, but each nation has unique values. So if we could recycle these templates, if we could absorb the nutrients from the collective knowledge in this room, I think that's what we're doing, and that's what we're here to share, to help everybody move forward in a good way, so where all of our interests are reflected in the future that we want to see. I would say, Ms. Lai.
Thank you, David. And yeah, whittling that down from 45 values to 5 values, that was a lot of work, right? That was hard work as well, and took many conversations. So every milestone moves at the speed of trust, essentially. So I want to say thank you to our 3 panelists here, to David, Ryan, and Dave. Thank you for sharing your expertise and knowledge. I think we've just scraped the surface of what comprises the CSF model, so feel free to chase us down today and tomorrow. Thank you for the time. I guess I pass it over to Logan.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Lisa, and to all of the panelists. I think we should give them one more round of applause for navigating the microphone adversity there. Thank you. So on behalf of the 10th Indigenous Resource Opportunities Conference, we have a small speaker gift for each of you. And with that, we're going to transition to our last fireside chat before lunch. It is my pleasure to introduce Stephen Rayner, Interim Executive